Where do you want to be when your child faces a life-threatening emergency? By their side, right? But what if you can't be there? What if you're 2,400 miles away when they need you most? LeBron James was in New York at a business meeting when his son Bronny suffered cardiac arrest. Nike deal, millions of dollars, the future of his career, but his son was dying, and he wasn't there. This is the day that changed LeBron's life forever, and the lesson he learned was devastating. Sometimes money and fame mean absolutely nothing. July 24, 2023, 6:47 a.m. LeBron James woke up in his Brentwood mansion to the sound of his alarm. He had a flight to catch, New York, Nike headquarters, a meeting that had been scheduled for months, a major endorsement renewal negotiation worth potentially $100 million over the next 5 years. His agent Rich Paul had been preparing for weeks. This wasn't just another business meeting. This was about securing his family's financial future for generations. LeBron got out of bed quietly, trying not to wake Savannah. She was still sleeping, her breathing soft and steady. He showered, dressed in a tailored navy suit, and went downstairs to the kitchen. The house was silent. His kids were still asleep. Bronny, Bryce, and Zuri. It was summer break. No reason for them to be up at this ungodly hour. LeBron made himself a protein shake and checked his phone. Messages from Rich Paul, flight at 9, car picking you up at 7:30. Nike execs are ready. This is the big one, Bron. LeBron responded with a thumbs up emoji. He thought about waking Bronny to say goodbye but decided against it. Bronny had a workout at USC later that morning. His son was preparing for his freshman season with the Trojans, following in his father's footsteps as a highly touted basketball prospect. Let him sleep, LeBron thought. I'll be back tomorrow night anyway. At 7:28 a.m., the black SUV pulled into the driveway. LeBron grabbed his bag, took one last look at his quiet house, and left. He had no idea that this decision, leaving without saying goodbye to his son, would haunt him for the rest of his life. The flight to New York was smooth. LeBron spent most of it reviewing documents for the Nike meeting, watching game film on his iPad, and texting with his business team. He felt good, confident. This meeting was going to cement his legacy, not just as a basketball player, but as a business mogul. The endorsement deal would include equity in Nike's basketball division, a signature line expansion into international markets, and creative control over all marketing campaigns. It was everything he'd worked for. The plane landed at LaGuardia at 2:43 p.m. Eastern Time, 11:43 a.m. Pacific. LeBron's phone had been in airplane mode for 5 hours. When he turned it back on, he expected the usual flood of notifications, messages from his team, social media updates, maybe a text from Savannah or one of the kids. What he got instead was 47 missed calls. His stomach dropped immediately. Nobody calls 47 times unless something is catastrophically wrong. The calls were from Savannah, from Rich Paul, from his mother Gloria, from his Lakers teammate Anthony Davis, from his security team, from numbers he didn't even recognize. And then he saw the voicemails. 12 voicemails, all in the last 3 hours. LeBron's hands started shaking as he opened the first one. It was from Savannah, and her voice was pure terror. LeBron. Oh God, LeBron, you need to call me right now. It's Bronny. He collapsed at practice. They're doing CPR. We're going to Cedars-Sinai. Please, please call me back. Please. The world stopped. Everything around LeBron. The other passengers gathering their bags, the flight attendants making announcements, the sounds of the plane, it all faded into white noise. The only thing he could hear was his own heartbeat pounding in his ears, and Savannah's voice saying those words. He collapsed. They're doing CPR. LeBron fumbled with his phone, nearly dropping it as he called Savannah back. She answered on the first ring. Savannah. LeBron's voice cracked. What happened? Where is he? Is he? He's alive, Savannah said immediately, knowing what LeBron was about to ask. He's alive, Bron, but it's bad. They had to use a defibrillator. His heart stopped for almost 4 minutes. LeBron felt like he'd been punched in the chest. His vision blurred. Where are you? What hospital? Cedars-Sinai. ICU. They won't let me see him yet. The doctors are still working on him. LeBron, you need to get here. You need to get here now. I'm in New York, LeBron said, and saying those words out loud made him want to vomit. I'm in New York for the Nike meeting. I'm getting on the next flight. I'll be there as fast as I can. You're in New York. Savannah's voice was barely a whisper. You're in New York. The way she said it, the disbelief, the hurt, the implicit accusation, cut deeper than any words could. LeBron had chosen a business meeting over being home with his family, and now his son had nearly died, and he was 2,400 miles away. I'm getting on a plane right now, LeBron repeated. I'm coming, baby. I'm coming. He hung up and immediately called Rich Paul. Cancel the Nike meeting. My son is in the hospital. I need a plane to LA right now. I don't care what it costs. Right now. Rich Paul didn't ask questions. I'll get you on a plane in 30 minutes. Text me updates. LeBron stumbled off the plane and through LaGuardia in a daze. People recognized him. They always did. And some tried to approach him for autographs or photos. But one look at LeBron's face and they backed off. His eyes were red. His jaw was clenched. He looked like a man on the edge of collapse. While waiting for Rich to arrange the flight, LeBron called his mother. "Mama," he said when she answered, and his voice broke completely. "Mama, I wasn't there. He needed me, and I wasn't there." Gloria James, who had raised LeBron as a single mother through poverty and struggle, who had been there for every moment of his life, spoke with the wisdom of someone who understood fear and guilt. "Baby, listen to me. This is not your fault. You hear me? This is not your fault. Bronny is strong. He's going to be okay. You get on that plane, and you get to your son. That's all that matters now." But LeBron couldn't accept that. It was his fault. He'd chosen money over family. He'd chosen a Nike meeting over being home, and now his son had suffered cardiac arrest, and he'd been on a plane, unreachable, for 5 hours. The flight back to LA was the longest 5 hours of LeBron's life. Rich Paul had chartered a private jet, which was faster than commercial, but every minute felt like an eternity. LeBron couldn't sit still. He paced the cabin. He called Savannah every 20 minutes for updates. Each time she told him the same thing. "He's stable. He's sedated. They're running tests. Just get here." LeBron tried to distract himself by reading news reports about what had happened, but that only made it worse. TMZ had already broken the story. Bronny James suffers cardiac arrest at USC practice. Social media was exploding with prayers, speculation, and conspiracy theories. "Pray for Bronny" was trending worldwide, but LeBron didn't care about any of that. He just wanted to get to his son. During the flight, LeBron received a call from the head physician at Cedars-Sinai, Dr. Sarah Chen. She explained what had happened at USC practice. Bronny had been running drills, basic conditioning work, nothing unusual or overly strenuous. He'd been joking with teammates, looking healthy and strong. And then, without warning, he'd collapsed, just fell to the floor mid-stride, unconscious before he even hit the ground. The USC medical staff had responded immediately. They'd performed CPR. After 3 minutes and 47 seconds of chest compressions, they'd used an automated external defibrillator, an AED, to shock Bronny's heart back into rhythm. It worked. His heart started beating again. They'd rushed him to Cedars-Sinai, one of the best cardiac hospitals in the country. "Mr. James," Dr. Chen said carefully, "your son is stable now, but I need to be honest with you about the seriousness of this situation. Cardiac arrest in a young, healthy athlete is extremely rare and extremely concerning. We're running extensive tests to determine the cause." "What do you think caused it?" LeBron asked, his voice hollow. "We won't know for certain until we complete the tests, but based on preliminary findings, we believe Bronny has a congenital heart condition. Specifically, we suspect hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, HCM. It's a genetic condition where the heart muscle becomes abnormally thick, which can interfere with the heart's electrical system and cause sudden cardiac arrest." Genetic, the word hung in the air. "Genetic," LeBron repeated, meaning he got it from me or Savannah. "It's possible, yes. HCM is inherited in about 50% of cases. We'll want to screen you and Mrs. James as well, just to be safe." The plane finally landed at LAX at 9:17 p.m. Pacific time. LeBron had been traveling for over 6 hours. By the time his car got him to Cedars-Sinai, it was 9:53 p.m. Nearly 12 hours since Bronny's collapse. 12 hours since LeBron's world had fallen apart. Savannah was waiting in the ICU waiting room. When LeBron walked in, she stood up, and they just held each other. No words. Just holding on to each other like they were drowning, and each other was the only thing keeping them from going under. "Where is he?" LeBron finally asked. "Room 41. They said we can see him, but he's still sedated. He looks," Savannah's voice broke. "He looks so small, Bron. All those machines and tubes. He looks like a little boy." They walked to Bronny's room together, hand in hand. Nothing could have prepared LeBron for what he saw when he walked through that door. His son, his firstborn, his namesake, LeBron James Jr., lay in a hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and machines. There were IV lines in both arms, electrodes on his chest connected to a heart monitor that beeped steadily, an oxygen tube in his nose. His eyes were closed, his face was pale. LeBron's knees nearly gave out. He grabbed the doorframe for support, and Savannah had to help him to the chair next to Bronny's bed. LeBron reached out with a shaking hand and gently touched Bronny's arm. His skin was warm. He was alive. But he looked so fragile, so vulnerable, so unlike the strong, confident young man who'd been preparing to play Division I basketball just hours ago. "I'm here, son," LeBron whispered, even though Bronny couldn't hear him. "I'm here now. I'm so sorry I wasn't there before. I'm so sorry." LeBron stayed in that chair all night. Savannah eventually went home to check on Bryce and Zuri, but LeBron refused to leave. He held Bronny's hand and watched the heart monitor, counting every beep, every breath, every sign of life. Around 3 a.m., Dr. Chen came in to update him on the test results. "Mr. James, we've confirmed our initial suspicion. Bronny has hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. It's a serious condition, but it's manageable with proper treatment and precautions." "Manageable," LeBron repeated numbly. "What does that mean? Can he play basketball?" Dr. Chen hesitated. "That's a complicated question. Athletes with HCM are at higher risk for sudden cardiac arrest during intense physical activity. Some doctors would recommend he never play competitive sports again. Others believe that with an implantable cardioverter defibrillator, an ICD, and close monitoring, he could continue playing safely. An ICD? What's that? It's a small device we implant under the skin near the collarbone. It monitors the heart rhythm constantly. If it detects a dangerous arrhythmia, it delivers an electric shock to restore normal rhythm. Essentially, it's like having a built-in defibrillator. It's the same device that saved your son's life yesterday, except it would be internal and always with him. LeBron processed this information. His son would need a device implanted in his chest just to stay alive. And with this device, he could play basketball, possibly. But it's not without risks. The decision would ultimately be up to you, your son, and his medical team. But Mr. James, I need to discuss something else with you. Dr. Chen pulled up a chair and sat across from LeBron. Because HCM is genetic, and because Bronny is your biological son, there's a significant chance that you could have the same condition. LeBron's blood ran cold. Me? The symptoms can be subtle or non-existent until a cardiac event occurs. Many people with HCM don't know they have it. But given your son's diagnosis and your biological relationship, we strongly recommend you undergo cardiac screening as soon as possible. I'm a professional athlete, LeBron said. I've had physicals every year. Wouldn't they have caught it? Not necessarily. Standard NBA physicals don't always include the specialized cardiac imaging needed to detect HCM. We'd need to do an echocardiogram, an ECG, possibly an MRI. I can arrange for you to be screened this week. LeBron nodded, but he wasn't really listening anymore. His mind was spinning. His son had a genetic heart condition. He might have it too. Everything he'd built, his career, his legacy, his assumption that he was invincible, was suddenly fragile. Bronny woke up around 7 a.m. the next morning. LeBron was still in the chair next to his bed, having not slept at all. When Bronny's eyes fluttered open and focused on his father, LeBron felt something break open in his chest. Dad? Bronny's voice was hoarse from the breathing tube they'd removed earlier that morning. I'm here, son. I'm right here. What happened? Why am I in the hospital? LeBron had to take a moment to compose himself before he could answer. You collapsed at practice yesterday. Your heart stopped. But you're okay now. You're going to be okay. Bronny looked confused, trying to process this information. Then his face changed as memory came back. I remember. I was running. And then everything went black. That's it. I don't remember anything else. You don't need to remember, LeBron said, squeezing his son's hand. You just need to focus on getting better. Over the next few days, as Bronny recovered in the hospital, LeBron stayed by his side almost constantly. He cancelled all business meetings. He skipped Lakers workouts. He turned down media requests. The only thing that mattered was being there for his son. Savannah brought Bryce and Zuri to visit. Seeing his younger siblings seemed to lift Bronny's spirits. They told him about what was happening at home, about their summer activities, about anything and everything except the scary reality of why their brother was in a hospital bed. On the third day, Dr. Chen brought in a pediatric cardiologist to discuss treatment options with Bronny and his parents. The doctor explained the ICD procedure, the recovery time, and the lifestyle changes Bronny would need to make. Can I still play basketball? Bronny asked directly. That was the question he'd been afraid to voice, but he finally had to know. The doctors exchanged glances. With the ICD and careful monitoring, it's possible, the cardiologist said. But there are risks. We'd need to have extensive discussions about those risks before making any decisions. Bronny looked at his father. LeBron saw fear in his son's eyes. Not fear of dying, but fear of losing the dream he'd worked toward his entire life. Basketball wasn't just a sport for Bronny. It was his identity, his passion, his path to following in his father's legendary footsteps. We'll figure it out, LeBron said firmly. Together, whatever you decide, whatever you want to do, we'll support you. But right now, you just need to heal. LeBron underwent his own cardiac screening 3 days after Bronny's incident. The testing was extensive. Echocardiogram, ECG, cardiac MRI, stress tests. He lay in the MRI machine for 45 minutes, listening to the loud banging and trying not to think about what they might find. The results came back 2 days later. Dr. Chen called LeBron personally. Mr. James, I have good news. Your cardiac screening came back clear. You do not have HCM or any other detectable cardiac abnormalities. LeBron exhaled for what felt like the first time in a week. Thank God. However, Dr. Chen continued, we did find that you have some minor enlargement of the left ventricle, which is actually common in elite endurance athletes. It's called athlete's heart, and it's generally not dangerous. But given your son's diagnosis, we recommend you continue to be monitored annually. After he hung up, LeBron sat alone in his home office for a long time. He'd been cleared, he was healthy, but his son had a life-threatening condition. And the randomness of it that Bronny had inherited this genetic lottery ticket, while LeBron had been spared, felt profoundly unfair. Bronny had the ICD implanted on July 31st, exactly 1 week after his cardiac arrest. The surgery went smoothly. He'd have a small scar on his chest, and a device about the size of a cell phone under his skin, but he'd be alive. The ICD would shock his heart back into rhythm if it ever stopped again. During Bronny's recovery, LeBron had time to reflect on what had happened, on where his priorities had been. on what really mattered. He'd been in New York negotiating a $100 million endorsement deal, while his son's heart was stopping 2,400 miles away. He'd been unreachable on a plane for 5 hours during the most critical moments. He'd been so focused on building his business empire, on securing his legacy, on making money that his family already didn't need, that he'd missed the signs of what was really important. LeBron had spent his entire career being praised for his work ethic, his dedication, his relentless pursuit of excellence. But suddenly, all of that seemed hollow. What good was a $100 million night deal if he wasn't there when his son needed him most? One evening, about 2 weeks after Bronny's cardiac arrest, LeBron and Savannah sat on their back patio after the kids had gone to bed. They'd been through hell together, and they were both exhausted, physically, emotionally, spiritually. "I keep replaying that morning," LeBron said quietly. "When I left for New York, I almost woke Bronny up to say goodbye. I was standing at his bedroom door, but I decided not to because I didn't want to disturb him. And now I wonder, if I'd gone in, if I'd talked to him, would I have noticed something, some sign that something was wrong?" "You couldn't have known," Savannah said, taking his hand. "Even the doctors said this condition often shows no symptoms until it happens. But I should have been there, not for the Nike meeting, here, with my family. Bron, you've built an incredible life for this family. You've provided opportunities for our kids that most people can't even imagine. You did that through hard work and sacrifice. You can't blame yourself for being successful. But at what cost?" LeBron looked at his wife. "I've missed so many moments, games, recitals, dinners, conversations. I've been so focused on building my legacy that I've forgotten that my legacy isn't championships or endorsement deals. It's them, Bron. That's what I'll be remembered for by the people who actually matter." Savannah squeezed his hand. "So what are you going to do differently?" LeBron thought about that question for a long time. "Everything," he finally said. "I'm going to do everything differently." The changes started immediately. LeBron restructured his entire business schedule. He turned down meetings that conflicted with his kids' activities. He delegated more to his business partners. He stopped checking his phone during family dinners. He made a rule: no business travel during the school year unless absolutely necessary. Some people in his inner circle questioned these changes. Rich Paul gently suggested that stepping back from certain opportunities could hurt LeBron's brand. Business partners worried that he was losing his competitive edge. But LeBron didn't care. He'd learned the hardest lesson of his life. You can't get time back. You can't undo being 2,400 miles away when your son's heart stops. In late August, Bronny had to make a decision about his basketball future. USC had been supportive throughout his recovery, but the question remained, would he continue playing? The family sat down together to discuss it. Bryce and Jury were there too. LeBron wanted them to understand that this was a family decision, that everyone's voice mattered. "I want to play," Bronny said firmly. "I know there are risks. I know it could happen again, but basketball is who I am. If I give it up because I'm afraid, then that thing in my chest wins, and I'm not letting it win." LeBron looked at his son, at the determination in his eyes, the strength in his voice, and felt an overwhelming sense of pride. Bronny hadn't inherited his father's perfect genetics, but he'd inherited something more important: his father's resilience, his refusal to quit, his ability to face fear and keep moving forward. "If you want to play, we'll support you," LeBron said. "But we do it smart. You follow every single doctor's recommendation. You don't push through pain or exhaustion, and the second anything feels wrong, you stop. Deal?" "Deal." Bronny returned to basketball that fall, cleared by his medical team to play with the ICD. It wasn't easy. He had to adjust to the device in his chest. He had to overcome the psychological hurdle of trusting his heart again. There were moments of anxiety, times when his heart would beat fast during intense play, and he'd wonder if this was it, if it was happening again. But it didn't happen. The ICD did its job, monitoring constantly, and slowly, Bronny rebuilt his confidence. He played his freshman season at USC, not as a star but as a role player, someone who'd been through something traumatic and come out the other side stronger. LeBron went to every single home game. He rearranged Lakers practices and recovery sessions to be there. He sat in the stands like any other parent, not in courtside VIP seats but in regular seats with the other families. He cheered when Bronny scored. He stressed when Bronny fell. He lived and died with every possession, not as LeBron James, the NBA legend, but as a father watching his son do something brave. After one game in November, Bronny played particularly well. 12 points, 5 rebounds, 0 cardiac issues. As they walked to the car together after the game, just father and son, Bronny said something that LeBron would never forget. "Thanks for being here, Dad. I know you've got a lot going on with the Lakers and everything, but it means a lot that you come to these games." LeBron stopped walking and turned to face his son. "Bronny, I need you to understand something. There is nowhere on this earth I would rather be than watching you play basketball. Not a Lakers game, not a business meeting, not a championship celebration. Right here watching you is exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I'm sorry it took almost losing you for me to realize that." Bronny hugged his father, and in that embrace, In that parking lot outside a college basketball arena, LeBron felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. Not the peace that comes from winning or achieving or accumulating, but the peace that comes from being exactly where you're supposed to be, with exactly who you're supposed to be with. The incident changed everything about how LeBron approached his final NBA seasons. He was still excellent, still one of the best players in the league, but he played differently, less obsessed with chasing records, less concerned with legacy debates and GOAT conversations, more present, more grateful, more aware that every game could be his last, and that basketball was ultimately just a game. In interviews, when reporters asked about his longevity or his future plans, LeBron's answers changed. He used to talk about playing until he was 45, about breaking every record, about proving he was the greatest ever. Now he talked about his kids, about being present for their lives, about knowing when it was time to walk away. "I've got a few more years in me," he'd say. "But when Bronny's playing his games, when Bryce is playing his games, when Zuri's doing her things, that's where I need to be. And if that means retiring earlier than I planned, so be it. Because I learned something this summer that I'll never forget. Your kids don't care about your championships. They just want you there." During the 2023-2024 season, there was a game where Bronny and LeBron played at the same time. Bronny for USC in an afternoon game, LeBron for the Lakers that night in the same city. LeBron attended Bronny's entire game, then rushed to his own game and played 40 minutes. After the game, a reporter asked if he was tired. "Tired?" LeBron laughed. "Man, I got to watch my son play basketball and then play basketball myself. That's not exhausting. That's what I live for. That's the dream." The story of July 24, 2023, became part of the James family narrative. Not a secret, but not something they talked about publicly very often either. It was too personal, too raw, too close to a nightmare that almost came true. But privately, in family conversations, it became a reference point. "Remember that day," they'd say. And everyone knew what day they meant. The day everything changed. The day priorities got reordered. The day LeBron learned that being the king of basketball meant nothing if you weren't present for your kingdom at home. Bronny's scar from the ICD implant healed, but it remained visible, a thin line on his chest, a permanent reminder of the day his heart stopped and his life changed forever. He didn't hide it. In fact, he wore it with a kind of pride. It was proof that he'd survived, proof that he'd faced something terrifying and come back, proof that he was stronger than his condition. LeBron would sometimes see that scar when Bronny was shirtless around the house, and every time it hit him like a punch to the gut, a reminder of what could have been lost, a reminder of where he'd been when it happened, a reminder of the phone call from Savannah that had changed everything. 2 years later, in the summer of 2025, LeBron announced his retirement from the NBA. He was 40 years old, still productive, still capable of playing at a high level. But he was done. He'd won 4 championships. He'd broken the all-time scoring record. He'd played with his son in the NBA. Bronny had been drafted, and they'd shared the court for a handful of meaningful moments. At his retirement press conference, someone asked LeBron what he was most proud of in his career. Everyone expected him to talk about championships, or records, or the comeback from 3-1, or bringing a title to Cleveland. But LeBron surprised them. "The thing I'm most proud of," he said, "is that in 2023, when I had to choose between my career and my family, I finally chose right. I'm proud that I learned the lesson. I'm proud that I changed. I'm proud that my kids know they're more important than any contract or any game. That's my real legacy, not the stats or the rings, but that my kids know they come first." A reporter followed up. "Are you referring to what happened with Bronny?" LeBron nodded. "My son's heart stopped on July 24, 2023. And I was 2,400 miles away at a business meeting. That's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. But it taught me what really matters. And I spent every day since then making sure I never made that mistake again." The press conference ended, but that moment became one of the most viewed clips from LeBron's retirement. Because people understood it. Parents especially understood it. The guilt of not being there. The fear of losing a child. The realization that all the success and money and fame doesn't mean anything if you miss the moments that matter. Years later, when Bronny became an established NBA player, he did an interview where he was asked about that day in 2023. He was in his late 20s by then, a father himself, with a better understanding of his own father's journey. "My dad carries guilt about that day," Bronny said, "but I wish he wouldn't. Because what happened after that day, the way he showed up for me, for my brother, for my sister, for our family, that's what I remember. Not that he wasn't there for 4 hours on one day, but that he was there for every day after. That's what matters." The interviewer asked if Bronny ever worried about his heart condition. "Every day," Bronny admitted, "but I've learned to live with it. The ICD is part of me now, and honestly, it taught me something important. Life is fragile. Tomorrow isn't promised, so you better make sure the people you love know you love them. You better make sure you're spending your time on what matters. Because you never know when your heart might stop, and when it does, the only thing that matters is what you did with the time you had." The story of July 24, 2023, doesn't have a perfect ending. There's no neat resolution. Bronny still has a genetic heart condition that could end his career or his life at any moment. LeBron still carries guilt about being in New York that morning. The fear never fully goes away. But what did change was everything that mattered. Priorities, perspective, presence. LeBron learned that being the greatest basketball player in the world meant nothing if he wasn't present for the people who needed him most. He learned that money and fame and legacy are hollow if they come at the cost of missing your son's life. He learned that you can't get moments back, can't undo being absent, can't take back the times when work came first and family came second. The lesson was devastating. Sometimes money and fame mean absolutely nothing, but the growth that came from that lesson was everything. Because LeBron James didn't just become a better basketball player after July 24, 2023, he became a better father, a better husband, a better man. And in the end, that's the only legacy that really matters. Where do you want to be when your child needs you most? That's the question LeBron James had to answer on the worst day of his life. And every day since then, he's made sure the answer is, right there, exactly where I'm supposed to be. Not 2,400 miles away, not in a meeting, not chasing money or fame or records, right there, with the people who matter. That's what Bronny's cardiac arrest taught LeBron James, and it changed him forever.